Well, David. May I call you David?
You may call me David.
Thank you.
It's my name. It's what my mom calls me.
Oh.
My kids call me
How is
something
your mom?
else. Yeah, she's doing all right.
Good.
87.
Oh.
Prime playing giving candidate.
Right?
Yeah.
Is
real
she, though?
estate.
Is she too old for a playing gift?
She's never too old. Never too old.
To start one?
To put somebody in the will at 87, that's absolutely acceptable. You just want to make sure that they're competent.
Yes.
Because if they're not competent, you could get challenged later, and that's a problem. That is also unethical for us to talk to people that are incompetent, don't have their wherewithal.
What's the likelihood at that age that a donor would change their plans? Is she in a assisted living or
She's not. She's
independent living?
independent in her own apartment, her own real estate. And I see plans change up to 85, 86, 87. It's not so unusual anymore. People are now living into their 90s. So we're starting to see more and more people willing to or not willing to that are actually changing their wills at that age.
Terrific. And we know that some of those life-triggering events can be moving into retirement
community. Right? It could be new grandchildren. It could be death of a spouse. It could death of a child, a wedding, marriage of a child, all kinds of things at that point.
My favorite, charity ignoring them, and they get upset and take them out.
That is the big one. Now,
not my favorite as a fundraiser, as a donor.
But it's one of the big ones. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
But real estate, I mean, she has real estate, and sometimes at that point we find people wanting to give, say, vacation homes. Like my mom did have an apartment down in Florida, a condo down in Florida, that she decided she just didn't want to go down anymore, and she was done. She sold it, but she had the option, was approached by somebody, hey, would you consider giving us the real estate? She didn't end up doing it, but...
Sounds risky, involved, expensive from a charity standpoint, but I think you're going to tell me it doesn't have to be.
Well, there are ways of minimizing your risk, minimizing the expense to the charity. And, we talk about the assets, the great transfer of assets from the baby boomers down. And the reality is the largest asset group in the world, in this country, is real estate. Almost 3 times larger than the amount of stock holdings. And we're always asking for stock, but we very rarely ask for real estate. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, we don't understand, a lot of people don't understand what it takes to convey real estate into an entity. You're thinly staffed, you don't have the expertise, it's time consuming, and it does put the charity at risk. So when you title property into the charity now owns it. That means they have to pay real estate taxes on it, upkeep, maintenance, cut the grass if you have the risk of trying to sell the property. The story I like to tell, I tell it. I don't like the result because it impacted our organization. As we were given a piece of property in New Jersey in 2006, appraised out at about $600,000. We were only able to sell it last year for $120,000. Our carrying over the last umpteen years was about $230,000 between taxes, winterizing the place, the maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. What went wrong? The real estate market crashed. I had good appraisals. I had good second appraisals, drive-by appraisals. Everything looked good. Real estate market collapsed, and the other thing we didn't know what was going on is a new office complex shopping center moved a street over. That became the Prime Avenue. Ours became secondary, and all those stores there shut down, and there was nothing we could do. So
we're trying to encourage people to take real estate.
I understand that, but here's the moral of the story. Had I been smart about it, back in 2006 and knew what I know now, I could have minimized that risk. And there's many different ways of doing that. One is today we have a proliferation of donor-advised funds, Vanguards, Fidelities, community foundations, Schwab, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not advocating for any of them. Most of these donor-advised funds will actually accept the real estate, and they will then liquidate the real estate. So here I've got a donor I'm talking to that wants to give me a piece of property. I don't want to take it a title. I don't have the staff. I don't have the expertise. I don't want to assume the risk of sale. So what I encourage them to do is open up a donor-advised fund at Schwab or Vanguard or wherever, take the real estate, title it into the donor-advised fund. They get their tax deduction based on the fair market value when they put it into the donor-advised fund. The donor-advised fund then has expertise whose job it is to liquidate these real estate. And once it's liquidated and changed to cash and invested in the donor-advised fund, then my donor wrote a recommendation that the funds be transferred to, my charity. And I didn't have title. I didn't have the headache. I didn't have to worry about it. Now, if you have your own donor-advised fund, as some schools and some entities do, it doesn't work because really it's your donor-advised fund. That means the real estate's coming into you. So you got to be careful with that, and you can't use your own. But Schwab, any other third party.
Is that the IRS saying it doesn't work?
Well, no,
Driving
it's
that?
not. It doesn't work. It works. You can take the property and you can liquidate it there, but the problem is the title's going into the donor advised fund that's owned by the charity.
Uh-huh.
That puts the charity at risk. It has all the problems that we're trying to avoid.
Exactly.
So that's one way. There's another way of doing it if your risk is liability. If you're not worried about the risk of sale or maintaining the property, but the risk is kind of liability. So, for example, a commercial property where you know it's going to sell or there's an income stream from it, but there might be liability as in, I don't know, a roof blows off or a tree falls on it and, God forbid, kills somebody, and now your assets of the university are exposed. Whatever the reason is, you can minimize that type of risk by creating what's called a single member limited liability company.
Say that slowly one more
A
time.
single member limited liability company, which is a legal structure allowed by the state where the charity is the sole shareholder, if you want to think of it in terms of share or membership holder. And if you do that, you put the property into that shell company, basically, if you think of it as a shell. And if something happens, the liability stays within that shell. The only assets there are the real estate. So all that's at risk at that point is the real estate. There are some technicalities. If there's environmental issues, you got to be careful with, but it will help isolate that risk. Doesn't isolate the risk of maintaining the property and take it for a long period of time and the risk of sale, which is really the biggest risk. I mean, once you do your due diligence, especially in residences, you can hire inspectors, all kinds of things. You can get rid of some of that risk. You can insure the risk, but it's the sale, the one story that I told you in the beginning. And there is a third way that you can minimize that risk, and it actually minimizes all the risk. And that is what's called the Guest decision by one of the tax courts. And it's a funky decision. I mean, you wouldn't think it works, but it works. It's been upheld. There are other courts that have seen this. And essentially what you do is a charity enters into an agreement, a gift agreement, with the owner of the real estate, with your donor. And in that agreement, you say you're going to basically, at some point, donate the property to the charity. And then you put a paragraph in there that says, I'm going to appoint the donor, the owner of the property, as my agent on behalf of the charity for them to sell the property. So they go ahead and they sell the property as your agent now. Your interest is kind of created through the gift agreement. You have an interest in the property. However, you've never took title to the property. It's still in the name of the donor. So you have an agreement that says the donor will take, until it's sold, the donor will take care of it. They'll pay the taxes, et cetera, as they had been. Once the property is sold, you then instruct your agent to transfer the money directly into the charity. So it doesn't go to the donor, then to the charity. It goes from the buyer directly in the charity. Then you basically tell your agent now to have the deed transferred from the owner of the property, not the charity, directly to the new buyer. You wouldn't think that works, but it works. But if you think about it, title never went into the charity, so there's no liability risk. The risk of selling is really on your donor, because they're going to maintain the property until the property is sold. They kind of maintain the property, they maintain the risk, et cetera, et cetera. The property sold, you get the funds. They get at that point the tax deduction, and it works. Strange decision, but it works.
And funky.
It is funky. It's
Would
also
Would James Brown think it was funky?
James who?
Before your time.
But it must be.
Yes.
It's also a good way. We discuss a lot of time the risk of taking real estate and converting it to a charitable gift annuity. Mm-hmm. So here's one where you can actually provide that it will exchange in the gift annuity once the transfer of funds come in. You never take title. You don't have that risk. When the funds come in, that's the amount of the gift annuity. So it's another way of creating an opportunity for your donor to talk about real estate as an asset that they can give you.
What do you think the likelihood of a donor saying, you know what, that sounds really complicated, forget it, or I'll just sell it and give you the proceeds?
Well, if they sell it and give the proceeds, that's not the best thing to do. Because if they sell it, depending on whether it's their main house, whether they get the exclusion from, the capital gains, assuming they held it for a long period of time, they basically have income, and then they're going to try and offset it with the donation. When you transfer the property directly to the charity sells it, or you get to that state where you have some entity that sells it as a charity, like the Guest decision. They don't have income, and therefore they don't get a charitable deduction that way. They get basically the charity selling the property, so there's no capital gains tax paid there. The donor basically gets the fair market value deduction without having any real income ramifications or income tax issues with it.
So I would think the donor motivation has to be pretty strong to go through all this.
It is. You have to have that discussion, explore the possibilities. There are a lot of people with vacation homes now under the new tax code. The SALT deductions and the mortgage deductions don't apply to second homes, and the SALT deduction limiting your amount of taxes you can deduct from your income taxes is $10,000 regardless of how many properties you own. So we have a lot of people talking to us about vacation homes now. They're older. They don't want them. If they sell them, they're going to be whacked with capital gains tax. Whacked is a technical term, and they no longer have the advantage of being able to deduct the real estate taxes that they had before because they're maxed out at $10,000, and that's their primary house takes care of that. So this is a time to really be talking about it. And it's not an asset I would be afraid of. There are ways of doing this. Donor advised fund, where you really don't have to do anything.
That sounds like the simplest.
It's the simplest way.
Yeah.
But if you've got a sophisticated real estate person, using that William Guest decision is really the better way of doing it.
And who would people set up, if they need some of this good ideas?
I don't know, Joe.
Guidance.
Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters?
No, Gift Planning Development.
Gift Planning Development. I've heard of them.
Yeah.
Good bunch of guys.
And
women,
right? So if you'd like to talk about real estate gift opportunities, if you'd like to talk to us about ways to get your overall gift planning program started or to the next level, please give us a call for a free high-level assessment. We'll do that for free, right? High level?
We'll do that for free.
Yeah. And how do they reach us? info@giftplanningdevelopment.com.
Or they can call us at
610-653 7906. Until next time, I'm Joe.
And I'm David.
And together we're Joe and
David.
All the best.